Are we entering an age of collective stupidity? There's a strange feeling in the atmosphere. You've probably sensed it too. It's not just the noise, the chaos, the endless scrolling. It's something deeper. It's the sense that somehow, despite all the access we have to knowledge, to history, to science, to art, something fundamental is slipping away. We are more connected than ever, yet lonelier. We're more informed than ever, yet more easily deceived. We have unlimited data at our fingertips, but less wisdom in our hearts. And so the question begins to form uncomfortably in the back of our minds: are we entering an age of collective stupidity? At first, it sounds like a provocation. Surely we're smarter than we've ever been. We've got AI satellites mapping the universe, medicine that can edit genes, phones that can recognize our faces. So how could we possibly be stupid? But this is where philosophy demands that we pause. Because intelligence is not the same as wisdom, and information is not the same as understanding. That's the first crack in the illusion. We may be living in an era of hyper-information, but that doesn't mean we're thinking more clearly. In fact, it may be the opposite.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's start with a simple observation. When was the last time you changed your mind about something important? Not just a trivial opinion, but something central to how you see the world. Most of us can't remember. And that's telling, because the truly intelligent mind isn't the one that clings to its views, it's the one that updates them. The philosopher Socrates famously said, "I know that I know nothing." That wasn't humility. That was clarity. It was a reminder that wisdom starts when ego ends. But today we don't reward people for changing their minds. We reward them for sticking to their tribe, their brand, their narrative. And in doing so, we've created a culture where being wrong is worse than being dishonest, where appearing confident is valued more than actually being thoughtful. This is where the concept of collective stupidity begins to take shape. It doesn't mean that individuals are dumb. It means that when we gather in large groups online, politically, cultural movements, we start to think worse together than we would alone. Why? Because we stop thinking at all. We outsource our thinking to the crowd, to the algorithm, to the influencers. And that's where the tragedy begins. We confuse agreement with truth. The louder an idea is repeated, the more real it feels. Not because it's been reasoned through, but because it's been liked, shared, retweeted, and approved by the digital mob. Here's a terrifying thought. What if the internet, instead of making us smarter, is slowly eroding our ability to think independently? We don't raid, we skim. We don't discuss, we argue. We don't reflect, we react. And worst of all, we don't seek to understand, we seek to win. Every opinion becomes a battlefield, every post a performance. But beneath all of that noise, we've lost the thing that makes intelligence meaningful, the ability to sit in uncertainty. The ability to say, "I don't know yet," or "let's look deeper," or even just, "maybe I'm wrong." You see, stupidity in its most dangerous form isn't loud. It's certain. It's the refusal to examine, to question, to wrestle with complexity. And collective stupidity is when that refusal becomes normalized. When institutions stop asking hard questions. When education becomes about memorization, not exploration. But when politics becomes branding. When news becomes theater. when we start believing that feelings are facts and that whoever shouts the loudest must be right. And yet, there's something even more insidious happening. We are becoming addicted to distraction. Not just technologically, but psychologically. We don't just avoid hard truths, we scroll past them. We doom scroll, binge, refresh, repeat, constantly looking for the next hit of stimulation. But here's the philosophical catch. A distracted mind cannot be a wise mind, because wisdom requires stillness, reflection, depth, and those are things that the modern world has conditioned us to avoid. In fact, we now treat boredom as an emergency, silence as awkward, deep thinking as inefficient. So the question becomes, what happens to a civilization that loses its taste for thinking? What happens when we stop cultivating minds and start manufacturing consumers? When education is about test scores instead of curiosity? When politics is about emotion instead of ideas? When truth becomes subjective and reason becomes optional? We don't fall into stupidity all at once. It's not a cliff. It's a slow, gentle slope. And we're already sliding. Not because we're incapable of intelligence, but because we no longer value it. We value virality, attention, certainty, speed, but not the slow, painful work of thinking clearly, ethically, and deeply. But that's the real danger. Because stupidity isn't just about what you don't know. It's about what you refuse to know. It's about the mind that's been so dulled by distraction and comfort that it no longer hungers for truth. But let me ask you something that might disturb you. Are you still capable of deep thought in a world designed to prevent it? When was the last time you sat with a question for hours before forming an opinion? When was the last time you heard an argument you disagreed with and tried to understand it instead of attacking it? If you can't remember, you're not alone. That's the point. This isn't about individual failure. This is about a collective shift, and if we don't become aware of it, we'll sleepwalk into a future where thinking becomes rare and stupidity becomes the norm. The architecture of ignorance, how systems are designed to keep us distracted and dumb if we truly want to understand whether we're entering an age of collective stupidity. But we have to go beyond blaming ourselves or each other. But we need to look at the systems we've built or allowed to be built around us. Because stupidity doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's cultivated, engineered, reinforced, but not always maliciously, but often profitably. But we have to ask, what if ignorance isn't just a byproduct of modern life, but the intended outcome of systems designed to exploit distraction, fear, and tribalism? The architecture of ignorance isn't accidental. It's efficient. Let's begin with the digital world. The space that was supposed to democratize knowledge has slowly become a machine that monetizes your attention. Think about it. The platforms we depend on, social media, news apps, entertainment feeds, aren't designed to inform you. They're designed to stimulate you, and stimulation doesn't require truth. It just requires engagement. The longer you're watching, scrolling, reacting, the more valuable you become, not as a thinker, but as a user. And that word matters. You're not treated as a citizen. You're treated as a consumer, or worse, an addict. And addiction doesn't care about truth. It thrives on outrage, novelty, and emotional volatility. The algorithms we interact with every day aren't evil. but they are indifferent. They reward what works. And what works again and again is content that bypasses your rational mind and hits your primal brain. Fear, shame, anger, validation. These are the levers being pulled not to inform you, but to keep you coming back. And the result? A culture where we're constantly stimulated, but rarely enlightened. Where we know everything about celebrity drama, but nothing about the philosophical roots of our own beliefs. But the architecture of ignorance goes deeper than just the internet. It's in our education systems too. We say we want to raise critical thinkers, but how often do we allow students to sit with ambiguity, to wrestle with paradox, to argue both sides of a moral dilemma? Instead, we teach to the test. We reward memorization over exploration. We create environments where questioning the narrative can feel dangerous socially, academically, even professionally. And so, slowly, we train people not to think deeply, but to comply efficiently. Then there's the media. The fourth estate, once imagined as a pillar of democracy, has become a theater of division. Not because journalists are inherently flawed, but because the business model rewards sensationalism. Nuance doesn't sell. Complexity doesn't trend. What trends is conflict. What trends is fear. What trends is simplicity. And so we're fed a diet of binary thinking, left vs. right, good vs. evil, US vs. them. But real life isn't binary. Real life is messy. And wisdom grows not from picking a side, but from understanding the spectrum. Have you noticed how rare it is to hear someone say, "I don't know," on television? Or, "I used to think differently, but I've changed my mind." That's not weakness. That's intellectual strength. But we've built systems that punish that kind of honesty. We want our experts to sound certain, even when they're not. We want our leaders to project confidence, even when the facts are still unfolding. And in doing so, we destroy the space for growth, for learning, for evolution. We turn thinking into a liability and certainty into a brand. And perhaps most dangerously, we've built a culture where speed is everything. Fast news, fast food, fast opinions. But thinking doesn't happen at the speed of a tweet. Wisdom doesn't download in 5 seconds. Deep understanding requires slowness, and slowness is now treated as failure. That we're told to keep up or be left behind. But keep up with what? A flood of shallow information and emotionally manipulative content. That's not progress. That's mental chaos. And the more chaotic our minds become, the easier we are to control, to distract, to manipulate. So here's the uncomfortable truth. If you wanted to design a society that looked smart but functioned stupidly, you'd build exactly what we have now. A system that rewards noise over thought, speed over depth, reaction over reflection, certainty over curiosity. And then you'd call it freedom. You'd call it progress. And we'd buy it because buying is what we've been trained to do. Buy the narrative, buy the identity, buy the illusion of intelligence while being slowly robbed of the tools that actually make us wise. Which leads to a terrifying question: have we mistaken access for understanding? Just because we can Google anything doesn't mean we know anything. And just because we can express an opinion instantly doesn't mean that opinion is rooted in truth. If we don't begin to question the very systems that shape our thinking, then we are no longer thinking at all, we are being thought for. The death of disagreement, why we fear debate and worship echo chambers. There was a time when disagreement was seen as a sign of engagement, a sign that people were thinking, questioning, wrestling with the world around them. But today, disagreement has become dangerous, not because it's violent, but because it's unwelcome. In a world increasingly divided into ideological tribes, disagreement is treated not as a path to truth, but as a personal attack. And so, we retreat not into silence, but into echo chambers, where only familiar voices are allowed, where only familiar ideas are repeated, and where anything that challenges our worldview is branded as offensive or toxic. This, more than almost anything else, is accelerating our descent into collective stupidity. Because when we fear disagreement, we stop growing. Why are we so terrified of being challenged? Why does hearing an opposing view feel like a threat rather than an opportunity? The answer lies deep within our psychological wiring, but it's been amplified by technology. Humans naturally seek comfort. We crave certainty. And reality messy, complex, contradictory is anything but comfortable. So instead of doing the hard work of confronting uncomfortable truths, we surround ourselves with narratives that make us feel right, safe, superior. These narratives are the walls of our echo chambers. And once you're inside one, it's hard to even notice. Because everyone agrees with you. Everyone laughs at the same jokes. Everyone shares the same outrage. It feels like truth because it's loud, it's repeated, and it never contradicts you. But here's the philosophical tragedy. Truth doesn't care about comfort. Truth lives in tension. It thrives in the friction between opposing ideas. And when we eliminate that friction, we don't just eliminate discomfort, we eliminate discovery. Think of the greatest thinkers in history: Socrates, Galileo, Kierkegaard, Simone Weil. None of them operated in echo chambers. They were disagreeable, not in the petty sense, but in the courageous sense. They questioned what others accepted. They challenged what others worshipped. And in doing so, they pushed humanity forward. But today we cancel what confuses us. We silence what challenges us. And every time we do that, we shrink the boundaries of our collective imagination. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you had a deep, respectful conversation with someone who fundamentally disagrees with you? Not just a debate to win, but a dialogue to understand. If that's rare in your life, you're not alone. But that rarity is a symptom of something much bigger: our cultural intolerance for nuance. We've turned disagreement into something shameful. And that's devastating, because without disagreement, we lose the ability to refine our ideas. Iron sharpens iron. But echo chambers don't sharpen anything. They dull us. They make us intellectually fragile, unable to tolerate complexity, allergic to ambiguity, and completely unprepared for real life, which is almost never black and white. This fragility has consequences. It's why we see people emotionally breaking down when confronted with uncomfortable facts. It's why college campuses, once the breeding grounds of radical thought, are now often the most ideologically rigid spaces. But it's why political discourse has devolved into tribal warfare, where compromise is seen as betrayal and moderation is seen as weakness. We've confused passion with truth, but passion without reason is just noise. And in the age of social media, that noise is deafening. Let's be brutally honest, disagreement is not the problem. disrespect is. We've forgotten how to disagree without dehumanizing. But that doesn't mean we should avoid disagreement altogether. Quite the opposite. We need to bring it back, to elevate it, to honor it. Because disagreement, when done with humility and curiosity, is the engine of wisdom. It's how we learn. It's how we see blind spots. It's how we challenge assumptions that might be killing our potential. And if we lose that, we lose the very foundation of progress. So what can we do? First, we have to start listening, not just to respond, but to understand. That means entering conversations with the possibility that we might be wrong. Hard, yes, but essential. Second, we need to expose ourselves to perspectives that make us uncomfortable, not to convert us, but to expand us. And third, we need to stop mistaking agreement for community. Real community isn't built on sameness. It's built on the shared commitment to truth, even when the path to truth is messy, loud, and full of disagreement. Because here's the deeper truth: the more we fear disagreement, the more we fear thinking itself. And that fear is exactly what leads us into collective stupidity, not because we don't have the capacity to think, but because we become unwilling to risk thinking. To think is to be vulnerable. To think is to explore. To think is to disagree. And if we can't do that anymore, then what are we really doing? The last light of wisdom: how you can resist the tide and rekindle deep thinking. So here we are, surrounded by noise, seduced by speed, trapped in echo chambers, and slowly drifting away from the art of thinking. It's easy to feel helpless, to believe that this tide of collective stupidity is too vast to resist. But here is the truth that history whispers to those willing to listen: all great awakenings begin with individuals who choose to think deeply in a shallow world. The mind, when disciplined and awakened, becomes a lighthouse, small perhaps, but powerful enough to pierce through the fog of confusion. And if enough of us become lighthouses, the darkness doesn't stand a chance. But it starts with you. Not with systems, not with institutions. With you. And the first step is deceptively simple: slow down. In a culture addicted to instant reactions, slowing down is an act of rebellion. Slow down your scrolling. Slow down your opinions. Slow down your consumption of information. Ask yourself, every time you're about to react, do I actually understand this? Or am I just echoing someone else's emotion? That pause, that moment of reflection, is the birthplace of wisdom. Then comes the harder part: seek discomfort. Not physical discomfort, but intellectual and emotional discomfort. Read books that challenge your worldview. Listen to people you disagree with deeply, attentively, not to win, but to learn. Wisdom doesn't grow in safe spaces. It grows in tension, in contradiction, in the friction between what you believe and what reality demands. If you never feel the discomfort of rethinking something important, you're not thinking, you're just reinforcing. You also need to reclaim boredom. That sounds absurd, doesn't it? But boredom is where thought begins. It's in the silence, in the pause between distractions, that your mind starts to connect dots you didn't know were there. Some of the greatest insights in history came not from stimulation, but from solitude. Einstein would sit for hours in thought experiments. Buddha found enlightenment in stillness. Today, we treat even 5 minutes of disconnection as unbearable. But if you want to revive deep thinking in your life, you need to protect your mind from being constantly hijacked by noise. And perhaps most importantly, you must protect your attention like it's sacred. Because it is. Your attention is your life force. Where it goes, your energy follows. And if you give it away to algorithms, to manufactured outrage, to endless digital triviality, then you're not just wasting time, you're sacrificing your potential. Create boundaries. Curate your inputs. Ask yourself, is this making me wiser or just louder? And if it's the latter, walk away. Not because you're above it, but because you're aiming higher. But none of this will matter if you don't cultivate the courage to stand alone. Deep thinkers are often lonely, not because they reject others, but because they refuse to conform to shallow consensus. There will be moments when you'll feel out of place in a world obsessed with noise. Moments when your silence will be misunderstood. When your refusal to join the mob will be seen as arrogance. But remember this, wisdom doesn't make you loud, it makes you still. And stillness, in a chaotic world, is the clearest sign of strength. The age of collective stupidity isn't inevitable. It's a choice. A slow, unconscious drift that becomes destiny only if we let it. But you can choose differently. You can choose to think, to reflect, to examine, and to question, to wonder. And in doing so, you light a torch that someone else might see. Someone younger, someone lost, someone hungry for truth. And before long, those sparks become a movement, not a movement of outrage, but of awakening. Because that's how history changes. Not with noise, but with clarity. Not with mobs, but with minds. One person at a time, choosing wisdom in a world that forgot it matters. So I leave you with this question: will you be that person? Or will you let the tide carry you away? Thank you for thinking with me.